Well, this coming Thursday is a special day for all of us. It's the great feast of the Ascension, and that means we continue to move towards the great feast of Pentecost. But this Thursday is also a special anniversary for me. It's the 45th anniversary of when I reported for my first priestly assignment at Sacred Heart Parish, which is in the Shadyside section of the city of Pittsburgh. But I wanted to share with you something that happened about 6 weeks before my 18 classmates and I were ordained at the beginning of May of 1975. We received an inquiry from Bishop Leonard, who was our bishop at that time. It was a preparation, if you will, for a personnel file. And there were two curious questions at the very end of the little survey. The first question was, could you indicate the three priestly assignments that you would most want to have? And then the second one, could you indicate the three priestly assignments that you would most not wish to be considered for? And so I can still remember my answers. You know, relative to the first one, I put number one, I'd love to be in a city parish. Number two, I'd like to be in suburban parish. Number three, I'd like to be in a rural parish. All of which was confirming the fact that all I ever dreamt of in terms of priestly ministry would be to be a parish priest. And then when it came to the other side, you know, what assignments would you prefer not to be a part of? I put number one, I would prefer not to be in high school ministry. Number two, I would prefer not to be in high school ministry. Number three, I would prefer not to be in high school ministry. Right after my ordination, it was a matter of getting both. The first was that I was assigned to a city parish, and I was thrilled. But something that I didn't anticipate was that carrying along with that, the bishop was asking me to get involved in high school ministry. And of the 45 years of my ministry as a priest, 13 of those was really in dedicated work in high school ministry. And I can tell you that looking back, you know, on those years, God obviously knew what he wanted and he knew what he was doing. Because whatever I was able to do in high school ministry and all that I learned from it really helped me to be prepared for everything else that would follow in my priestly ministry up to the very moment of my life. I share that story with you because we hear the same kind of thing happening in the Acts of the Apostles. You know, first of all, we hear a connection that turned out to be an extremely special friendship between Paul and Timothy. You know, when you have a chance to be able to open up the sacred scriptures in the New Testament and you take a look at Paul's letters, you know, especially his personal letters, you see there are two letters there that he writes to Timothy. And there is a very strong spiritual bond between Timothy and Paul. They worked so well together. And Luke recounts in the first reading today how that meeting took place. But as you and I listen to the way that the rest of that story unfolded as Locke read it to us, we see, first of all, that I'm sure Timothy was shocked. Never would he have imagined he who was born of a Greek father would be called to be an intimate part of a movement that would share with the world who Jesus was. And once Paul and Timothy began their ministry and they had ideas of the places where they needed to go, Luke lets us know very clearly that there were certain places that the Spirit at that moment wanted them to go and certain places where the Spirit didn't want them to go. And I think as you and I take a look at this story, and as the Spirit always wants to make application to each of our lives, we all know those experiences, you know, of being disheartened when things that we dreamt about in our lives, you know, things that we really wanted to get, or places where we wanted to be, or positions that we maybe wanted to be able to possess, didn't happen. And sometimes the hard knocks of life for all of us bring about a certain amount of disappointment. But within the context of all of that, my sisters and brothers, one of the important lessons that that today's reading from the Acts of the Apostles calls us to reflect upon is that life isn't about the direction that we want to give it. Life is all about the direction that God gives to us. Because when all is said and done, the purpose of everything that happens in our lives, even the smallest details of what happens to us in the course of a day, is really meant to focus our attention on our ultimate destination of getting to God's kingdom in heaven. And while we think that we may know a heck of a lot about ourselves and about our dreams, that always has to be superseded by the belief and the reality that the Father knows best. Our God knows best. And so as I take a look back 45 years ago, in my simplicity, maybe even in my narrow vision, as I shared with my bishop what were the dreams, what I would like to do with my priesthood, and what were the things that I might not want to be involved in the end, the Father knew best. In his great scheme of things for David Zubik, in the great scheme of things that God has in mind for every single one of us as individuals, the Father's deepest desire is to get us where he wants us to be, with him forever and always. And so, whenever you and I experience disappointment about things not going the way we want, before we become overwhelmed by disappointment, let's in fact be overwhelmed by the reassurance and the consolation that our God, our Father, knows best.